Good morning and welcome back to our summer comedy series. So far we have stuck to the Old Testament for our humor. We have been throughout the Old Testament looking at a lot of funny passages of scriptures, things that are meant intentionally to be humorous in the Bible. Today we'll be discussing the humor of Jesus, and I believe we're going to discover some things that might surprise you. Jesus has wit, and Jesus even calls names every once in a while. Reagan, when he was president, already the oldest president in history, was in a debate with Walter Mondale. Knowing the plan of the opposition was to make him out to be too old to be effective, he gave the famous line, "I will not make age a factor in this campaign. I am not going to exploit for political purposes my opponent's youth and inexperience." That wit, that humor during the debate is very similar to what we see in Jesus' back and forth in the scriptures with the Pharisees. It comes in a debate setting, it comes in that type of a public forum. It is important to note, Jesus' confrontational humor comes out in debate and not in discussion. Not in discussion, not in personal ways, but in a debate forum where they are trying to catch him in something. That is when he brings out this wit and this humor. Jesus didn't always have to make people laugh. I want you to understand, when we talk about this, we're trying to bring some lightheartedness to the scriptures so that we can understand not everything is completely so serious. But there was laughter and there were things meant to make us laugh when we read it, but it's not a class clown. Jesus didn't always have to be the center of everyone making them laugh and have to be that way all the time. He was very funny on occasion. And the majority of the occasions came when he faced absurd opposition. He dealt with their struggles by bringing humor. One occasion comes in Mark chapter 3. Mark chapter 3, starting in verse 3. Another time Jesus went into the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Jesus said to the man with the shriveled hand, "Stand up in front of everyone." Then Jesus asked, "Which is lawful to do on the Sabbath? To do good or to do evil? To save life or to kill?" But they remained silent. He looked around at them in anger and deeply distressed at their stubborn hearts, said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. The Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. Jesus sees this as a trap. He knows that they're out to get him. He knows that they want to get him, and so he lays a trap for them. He turns the tables on them. And he asks this question in verse 4, is it lawful to do good on the Sabbath? Now this is supposed to start to make us laugh. Of course it's lawful to do good. When is it illegal to do something good? Jesus is pointing out the absurdity here. Is it ever illegal to save a life? Is it ever illegal to help somebody out? Of course not. It's never a bad time to help somebody out. And he makes this point to them. It's like Jesus is asking, should we shut down hospitals once a week? No ambulances available on the Sabbath. Surely fires and natural disasters will obey the strict laws that you have placed on Saturdays. Nothing bad will ever happen on a Saturday. I'm sure of it. We won't have to worry at all. And when he says this, Jesus' opponents were silent. And their silence is telling. His wit had made the point. There is no bad day to serve somebody, to help somebody, to do good. There's never a bad time to do good. They were so obsessed with the laws that they had expanded upon that they could not see that. Jesus did this over and over again with the Pharisees and the teachers of the law. When it came to the Sabbath, he had this wit back and forth with them one after another throughout the scriptures. Jesus' wit is pretty extraordinary. Jesus did on one occasion meet a match for his wit though. In Mark chapter 7, starting in verse 24. Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First let the children eat all they want, he told her. For it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home and found her young child lying on the bed and the demon gone. Here is a woman who's quick-witted. Jesus makes the comment to her that I've come for the children of Israel. It's not right to give the dogs, this Syrian Phoenician woman, this woman who's not a Jew, he calls her a dog. It's not right to give the dogs the children's food. And here this woman snaps right back. But if I'm a dog, even the dogs get the scraps, Jesus. And he appreciates her wit back, so much so that he says, your daughter's healed. For that answer, your daughter is healed. Go home. She's better. Now, the next passages of Scripture may surprise you in what you see from Jesus and his involvement in name-calling. We teach our kids, if they can't say anything nice, not to say anything at all. Even to the point where we have to tell some kids, even if it's truthful, you can't call them a crybaby just because they're crying. We have to tell them these things. We don't use name calling. And there's just about zero tolerance for name calling anywhere in our society outside of politics. But Jesus uses name calling. Clever, funny, insulting names to make his point. Matthew 23 is full of it. If you read Matthew 23, Jesus is incredibly insulting to the Pharisees. He calls them hypocrites. He calls them a whole list of things. We'll read some of it starting in verse 25. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside they are full of greed and self-indulgence. Blind Pharisee, first clean the inside of the cup and dish, and then the outside will also be clean. Woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You are like whitewashed tombs. They look beautiful on the outside, but on the inside are full of the bones of the dead and everything unclean. In the same way, on the outside you appear to be people as righteous, but on the inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Before this, he tells them, you will strain out a gnat, but you will swallow a camel. He says to them, you're a dirty cup. You're a whitewashed tomb. You don't get it. You're so filthy on the inside, and you just care about looking good. Jesus does the same when he talks about them. Whitewashed tombs, it's like he's saying, they're beautiful tombs. They look amazing on the outside, spotless, but on the inside they contain death. Jesus goes on to call them a brood of vipers. It's about as insulting as it gets. The snake is not a good imagery in the Jewish nation. And he calls them a brood of vipers. He insults them by saying they'll swallow a camel and strain out a gnat. And Jesus is being funny here. But he's also name-calling. He's also name-calling. And what are we to learn from Jesus calling names? From Jesus talking like this? Well, first we should learn maybe we are a little too sheltered. Maybe we're a little too concerned in our society about not offending anyone. In fact, when we look at our society where everybody almost competes to be the most offended about something, I have more reason to be offended than you, and I'm more offended than you are, and you just look at it and it builds and it builds. And maybe we shouldn't be as offended. Maybe we should be a little thicker skinned. Maybe we should be able to take it on the shoulder. Second, from Jesus calling names, I think we need to learn it's okay to mock the wrong in the world. Jesus, when he uses humor, when he decides to mock something, he mocks the wrong in our world. When people are being ridiculous and adding all these laws and all these rules, he chooses those moments to mock. He chooses those moments to make his point with humor. And he calls them out again and again. And perhaps this is demonstrated nowhere better than in Matthew chapter 7 that Ben read for us. I'm going to start in verse 1. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the same measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take that speck out of your eye, when the whole time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. It's a pretty familiar passage of Scripture to us. It's been preached a lot. We talk about it a lot. And when it comes to this do not judge it's something that's been taught a lot. But rarely do I think we think of it as humor. And it is. Jesus is teaching, and this is a funny passage of Scripture here. It's supposed to be funny. Jesus paints the picture of a man with a 2x4 sticking out of his eye, trying to be the physician to take a speck out of his neighbor's eye. Can you imagine that type of a setting? Where obviously the one man has no right to be messing with the other man, and yet there he is. And Jesus says, this is what you do when you judge your brother. This is what you do when you judge your neighbor. Your life isn't in order. You have no right to be messing with their eye. Look at your own problems. We're supposed to see the absurd here. Jesus, it's like he says, come right up, sit down, let me look at your eye. Oh, don't mind my eye. I barely even notice it. Nowhere is the speck. No, now where's that speck in yours? How about we get you cured first? Can you imagine an eye doctor today with bottle cap glasses and an eye patch being your physician? And he wants to look at your eye, and it's so obvious that he's blind, it's so obvious he can't see, and he reaches for you, and instead of grabbing you, he grabs the dummy, the skeleton in the room with all the different organs, because he can't see. That's the picture that Jesus paints. And it's supposed to be a humorous one. Jesus points out how absurd we are in our thinking. And he uses humor to do it. And he says, look how silly you look when you try and help somebody else out, when you try and fix their problems, when you've got a plank in your own eye. Look how silly you look. And he uses humor to bring us back. Jesus often uses humor in the Scriptures. And most often to show us when we are being silly, when we're being absurd, when our views of something are off base, when we need correcting. Jesus, even against opposition to the kingdom of heaven, uses name-calling. When people are directly opposed to the kingdom spreading, to people learning about Jesus, he will use name-calling. In all of this, I think we need to be thicker-skinned. We need to learn to not be offended by everything. Remember, make it hard for anyone to offend you. In this day and age where people take pride in being the most offended, don't. Don't be. Don't let things offend you. Make it so hard for someone to offend you that they have to be really abrupt. They have to work really hard to offend you. Set a bar of offense so high that they have to jump really high to get over. And they have to exceed all your expectations in order to offend you. Be different than the world around you in this. Don't be offended by the little things. Don't let little things offend you. We also see the need to accept gentle humor as a form of rebuke. Jesus uses humor as a form of rebuke and redirect. Because Jesus himself is redirecting us when we take ourselves too seriously. When we look at it and say, but I've made this rule and this rule and this rule, and I'm going to follow them all, and everybody needs to do the same. That's what the Pharisees had done. And Jesus says, on the outside you're clean, you're a whitewashed tomb. On the inside you're dead. We need to see, sometimes we need to hear that we are the whitewashed tomb, that we look good on the outside, but inside are dead. Sometimes we need to hear that we are an eye surgeon with a plank sticking out of our own. Sometimes the most important point in the Bible, possibly the most important point, is that while the Bible is important, it is also funny. That there are humorous aspects that it chooses to be lighthearted and to remind us that these are people like us. That Jesus dealt with real people. That not everybody was stoic and uptight. Jesus himself uses humor and laughs, and he has wit. These are not enemies of the Bible, but they are a part of it. Not something to protect the Holy Scriptures from, but to embrace as a part of them, to better understand it. And so I encourage you, when you're reading the Scriptures, if it makes you laugh, laugh. When you're reading a story about a talking donkey, see the absurdity and laugh. When you're reading stories and you say, hey, that seems to be odd. I think they're trying to make a point. It's okay to laugh. It's okay to see the humor in it. Because Jesus himself calls us out with humor. Jesus himself brings humor into our lives. I think we need to have this full picture of God. That he's not just this stoic person. That Jesus wasn't this stoic person who never smiled, who never laughed. He was real and he was relatable. We need the best picture of him that we can have. And to take laughter out of it, to take the humor out of it, is to take part of him out of it. As you read, I encourage you. Read the Scriptures fully. Understand that there is so much more. This time I want to invite up the praise team. We're going to stand here and we're going to sing a song together. If you would stand with us, we're going to sing, Lord, I Need You. We need Jesus. We need him. We need his guidance in our lives.